Some people just know they could save hundreds on car insurance by checking Allstate first. Like, to check the Jumbotron first, before attempting to eat a stack of Supreme nachos in one bite. Now you're just a meme that everyone shares on game day. Checking first is smart, so check Allstate first for a quote that could save you hundreds. You're in good hands with Allstate. Savings vary, subject to terms, conditions, and availability. Allstate Fire and Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates, Northbrook, Illinois.
Ampire. Hey babies, hey babies, hey babies. Hi everyone, happy Wednesday. Hi everyone. I want to explain no podcast yesterday real quick. I didn't put out a podcast yesterday because Callow and I talked about Jon Allen potentially staying for a good portion of the show. And then the news came out that he was open, like that they gave him permission to be traded. So at that point, I felt like, what's the point of putting out a podcast that talks about old news literally in real time? So therefore, why we didn't have a podcast yesterday. Apologize for that. And today's will be more newsworthy unless the Commanders do something again at 11:03. Okay?
Yeah.
That's all, right?
Correct. Exactly right. Yeah. Sometimes the timing does not work out with what we're talking about.
No. So yesterday I made I had the opinion of, they have to have someone in line to replace Jon Allen just to release him. And I don't think that they do really on this roster. They're not better by subtraction there. However, they have the contract that he has this was predictable that it was going to go this way. And by the middle of the season when he was hurt with his pectoral injury, and it didn't look like he was going to come back, or if he did, maybe late in the season, but that didn't really pop up till late in the season that he was like, oh my goodness, he might be able to come back. Like, we had all kind of come to terms, all of us that are around the team, like this is probably it for him. And because his contract reads this way, he's got 1 year left, but there's no guaranteed money left on it. There's a major cap savings by moving on from him, somewhere in the neighborhood of around $18 million. So a couple of things are going to happen because he's been injured. Then he came back and he played a little bit, but he didn't have a major impact. I appreciated that he came back and played. And I said this yesterday, I said this before. I do feel like the contract was part of the motivation to do that. I think he realized the contractual situation he was in, fighting to get back to play in the games that matter. I think was, a show of his resilience and his dedication to this team and to everybody else, right? That like, hey, I'm not just going to hang it up for the year. If I can play, I will play. And the contract was part of that. And so I think he knew what was coming down the road too. And so it was going to go one of a couple ways. They were either going to release him or take an opportunity here to try to trade him or ask him to take a pay cut in an extension. And I thought that part was the most unlikely outcome of the three that were really out there. And I'm not surprised we are where we are. They weren't going to move forward with his salary the way it was, which against the cap was going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of like $24 to $25 million. So they were going to force him to make a decision. Does he want to stay at a lower tier deal? And I guess at this point, the Adam Peters and company are saying, why don't you go test the market, go see what's out there. And he did finish this, and people have forgotten that because the headline is they gave him permission to seek a trade. He did say everything's on the table. So if Allen goes out in the marketplace, finds out that his market value isn't what he thinks it is, or is it what he would hope it would be? I don't know what he thinks it is. Is it what he hoped it would be? Then there's a possibility, I would call it slim, but it's a possibility that they rework his deal, lower his cap number, and he's back. But I doubt that happens.
No, I kind of actually thought the same thing yesterday when people were talking through it, and I listened to Adam Peters' press conference, that this really does scream Allen probably went to the team, said, I have no guaranteed money left. I'd like a new deal. The team is going, you're on the wrong side of 30. We don't really have an interest of doing that. And maybe this is the team going, hey, go find a partner. We don't mind. And if they want to trade for you, they're probably going to extend you, right? Like that's what I would assume is going to happen here. Maybe it's not a crazy lucrative deal, but I would assume a team trading for Jon Allen gets him on a 2 or a 3 year deal, something like that. And maybe, just maybe, he doesn't find somebody and he comes back and plays out the final year of his deal. I'm with you. I think it's a slim chance, but I also think it's the team. Adam Peters literally said in his quote, "We're doing right by Jon." And I think that's completely fine on this circumstance.
I don't think he will come back here and play under the terms of this contract. I think it will, if he were to come back and play here, it will be restructured so that his pay scale is lowered. That's what I think I think ultimately would happen. And I don't think Allen, and his representative should automatically just accept that. I think they should look in the marketplace and see what is out there. Again, I'll go back to, it was kind of just assumed that this was his last season amongst us that are in and around the team, especially after he got hurt. When he came back and played, it changed my mind a little bit that there might be some wiggle room here. But again, I think that he did that for all purposes. Like, one, to show the team he was dedicated to them, and two, to show others, like, I will play through this. I know I'm at the age I'm at, but I can still be a very effective player and you can rely on me. So we'll see. I think the most likely outcome is he gets released. That's what I think will happen, but you never know. Someone might come along. Like, we've done this for the last couple of weeks, gone through the free agents. Name the defensive tackle free agents that are going to be available that are better than him. You're going to be hard pressed to find those names. Like, Sheldon Rankins is better than him. BJ Hill is better than him. I don't think so. Milton Williams might be, but you're going to pay him a really high salary to get him. Osa Odigizua is already in talks with his own team to stay. And if he does it, he'll get a big, big number. They're younger, but do you think they're better than Jon Allen? I don't know the answer to that. So he's going to find out on the market what he's worth. I don't believe he's going to be back here next year, but we're going to have to see how the market plays out. I do not think he comes back and plays on the current deal. I think if he comes back and says, I actually really want to be here, they're going to tell him, we need you to restructure your contract in a way that's beneficial to us. And maybe that it does extend him out, but it would be at a much lower rate than what he's making right now. That's how I think it would play out. I am more inclined to believe he's going to be playing somewhere else. That's what I think will happen.
I also think, too, like, we're starting to get to the point now where there's 4 major players that are up for trade now. Like, when do we see a player for player trade? I feel like if there's an offseason that's going to happen, it's going to be this one, because you have Debo, you have Kupp, you have Allen. Who am I missing? I'm missing another. You have Garrett, of course. And then I feel like I'm missing one other one somewhere. Yeah, Stafford as well. The Rams. That's a weird one. But the 4 that are probably that could warrant a player for trade. I think, like, you've got something going there. So I just feel like if there's an offseason where we finally see one of those player for player trades, I feel like it's going to happen here. Like, if you go to the Rams and you say, hey, Allen's trying to look for a change of scenery, a slightly new deal, you guys don't want Kupp anymore. Like, I could see a package where Allen goes to LA and Kupp comes back here if they were interested in that business. I'm just saying, like, I feel like the Commanders did this as well to say, hey, we've got a player too if anyone wants to come to the business table and, negotiate with us. Because as you just said too, he's going to be one of the best, if not the best D tackle available. That's a commodity this season.
So maybe it's not time to do his obituary of being a Commander because he's not definitively gone yet.
Sure.
But he's had an interesting run. He's had a really interesting. I've been thinking about this for the last 24 hours about, like, because I think in all likelihood it is the end. I agree with you. You put him out there to trade. Obviously, no one's jumped at Debo. No one's jumped at Cooper Kupp. No, I think someone will trade for Stafford if they're serious about it. I think somebody will. But because it's quarterback, and obviously the only way you'll acquire Myles Garrett if Cleveland ever comes around to it is a trade for him. There will be no other way to get him. He will not be released. They're not going to let him walk out the door. He's too valuable. Allen falls into the Debo and Kupp case where it's like, hey, look, he's a really good player. You know what you're getting with him, but you are going to have to try to trade for him. And most teams go, let's wait and see if you cut him. That's what most teams do. And I would assume that that's what would happen here. And any kind of return, you might be right, though. There might be instead of allowing Cooper Kupp to hit the open market where there will be a line of teams that would like to get him, you could make this move now. But you have to assume the contract that Kupp has in the same way that the Rams have to assume the contract Allen has if you trade him, which is why it's difficult to make a trade. There would have to be a line out the door to get these players to make the GMs want to do that. instead of like, let's just wait and then we can try to sign you on our own terms and not give, quote unquote, give anything up to do it. But I've been thinking about him for the last 24 hours. If this is it, and maybe this is not the time to do it because he needs to either be traded or signed somewhere else to really be not in this uniform anymore. I was thinking about him because I think Tress Way is the only player that's more longer tenured than him on this team right now. He's actually a free agent. I assume they're going to re-sign him, but he's a free agent. So technically he, currently on the roster, Jon Allen's longest tenured player on the team. He's been here, 8 years, right? First round pick, Bruce Allen. This is a Bruce Allen first round pick, 8 years. This is right around the time that I returned to Washington. So he kind of coincided with me moving back to the area, and he's played through this whole thing. So for me, it's like, wow, like this is someone who's kind of been in my second go around with being in and around the team constantly every day. He's like, him and Tress are like the constant. Him, Tress, Terry fall into like the constants for me. But even him, because he was kind of anointed as the leader for a long time. He spearheaded what was supposed to be the unit that turned the whole franchise around, that defensive line, because he was the first of the 4 that were drafted. He's going to be number 3 or 4 that's no longer with the team. And I think after the year Deron Payne had, contractually, they can't do anything with him right now. But like next year, we could be having the same conversation about him. So all of them could be gone within the next 12 months, the way things are going. Payne's going to have a career turnaround here, I think, to avoid a similar conversation next year with the team. But Jon's is interesting because Payne's so quiet, doesn't do a lot of interviews. Jon was a de facto leader who did do a lot of interviews, and it was very hit and miss with what you were going to get from him. One day he was like happy, pumping everybody up. The next day he's putting on a do-rag, yelling, I'm sick of this, what? Like, it was an interesting run with him for sure.
I think he was pretty consistent, actually. Like, his boiling point was that Giants game, which I think it was all of our boiling point by that time, because they gave up 14 points and they lost 14-7,
and lost
and lost, and it was supposed to be enemy fixing the offense. Yeah, I think that was a legitimate gripe by Jon Allen to be pissed after that game. But for the most part, Allen was no nonsense. Like, he was actually one of the guys. He reminded, like we always put him in the same light as Terry McLaurin, because he would just say, you know what, I'm just here to play football. It doesn't matter what's going on off the field. I have to show up and go to work every day. And that was appreciated. Yep. Like, as somebody that, grew up in that era, it was appreciated that a player was just like, I'm trying to ignore all the noise and show up and go to work. What I will say is, to your previous point about the defensive line, Jon Allen was the most consistent one out of the one that they drafted, out of the big 4 that they drafted. I think he was the most consistent one. Was he the best one at times? I don't know. Arguable, but he kind of reminded me a little bit of Ryan Kerrigan. Like, was he ever the best at his position? No, never. But was he good to great at times? Yes, I would say that. But at the same time, he never was going to anchor what we all hoped was what that defensive line was supposed to be, which is basically what Philly has right now. Philly has this defensive line that they could line up 4 and come after you, not have to blitz you. We all thought that was coming, with Allen being the first part of it, with Allen, Payne, Sweat, and Chase Young, and it never came to fruition. Yes. Unfortunately, I think he was never really the problem, but he was never going to be the one to drag all of those guys into the fight either.
They never cohesively came together at the same time. It never happened. Like, Allen had a couple of huge years. Payne in his contract year had an enormous year. Montez, the reason why he's not here was because he didn't have 15 sack seasons. That's all. Right. That's the only reason. I would somewhat argue that of the 4, he may have been consistently the best, but he didn't have the numbers to show it. Like, he never had the 15, 16 sack season, which would have warranted the type of contract that he ended up getting with Chicago. And we'll see if he ends up ever getting it there now that they've switched coaches again. Chase is a whole different situation in hindsight with injuries. I think it's hard to really know what his career would have been. He was supposed to be the freak. He was supposed to be the Jalen Carter, the Nick Bosa for them. He was supposed to be the one that changed everything dramatically in and around these other guys. But I agree, Payne and Allen for a period of time, and I don't think it was unfair to them, they were perceived as the best interior duo in the NFL. And considering where they were drafted, at what age they were drafted, and the success they had, and the, not one-off, but the best seasons they had were among the best at their position. They weren't Aaron Donald. They aren't Jalen Carter, but they were among the best. What never happened was the two of them doing it together with a group to make the group dominant. The group never became dominant. And I think that's the part about it that I think that none of us really ever understood why. Like, why did it never? You've spent all this draft capital on these players. They clearly have the talent to do it, but it's never come together as a whole. Singularly, they've each had these great moments. I'm with you on Jon. I thought Jon was a consistent. He stood up. He took the questions, face of the franchise on the defense at a time where it was not fun to be the face of the franchise of this team. And I will give him credit for that, for trying to mainly smile through as much of that as he possibly could. And I do agree with you. It probably was the right attitude that don't talk to me about federal investigations, name changes, all that stuff. I'm just here to do my job and play football. And for that, I do think we owe him a debt of gratitude. But on the field, and maybe it was just the mishmash of all the things that were going on, the hope and wish was after you get those four together that they would literally lead the charge and be best defensive line in football, if not one of the best ever, when you spend that kind of draft capital on a group, and it just never materialized.
Not only did it not materialize, I do think, like, it's worth saying here, he didn't have amazing talent around him either, right? Like, Ron Rivera could never find a linebacker to play behind him, right? The cornerbacks were always a mishmash. The safety position was also kind of in flux a little bit. They always had one safety and not the other. So I will say, it's not like he was surrounded by this influx of talent either. It's hard to make an impact as a defensive line when you're the only one or two players that actually are doing anything. What I will say is this, is like, Allen was the most consistent, but I think I always go back to this one drive, and you know the one drive I'm going to talk about here. When they were playing the Broncos 2 seasons ago, I think it was, when Payne was in the contract year, there was a drive where Payne had like a sack, a tackle, and a pass deflection. And I'm like, oh, this is what we've dreamed about the entire time. But it's literally one drive in both of their careers that I can point to go, you made a difference that was like a game-changing difference in a game, essentially. I go back to that moment and just think, God, he was in a contract year. I've never seen that from Allen, really, like basically wreak havoc on a whole entire drive like that. That was the dream. It was just never really realized here. And granted, once again, I still want to say again, they were not surrounded by all this talent either. So, like, defensive tackles can only do so much. You could just avoid them if you want to go somewhere else on the defense too. So yeah, I just call it a unrealized dream, was that defensive line essentially.
Allen, I thought, was very good. Allen had what was among best at position years for one season when he ended up getting a contract. Then he got hurt. People forgot. He got hurt the next year and kind of played through it. Payne had a contract year, boom, huge year. It hasn't quite put up those numbers since. So, yeah, it just never collectively came together. So let's see what happens with him. My gut says he's not going to be traded, but you might be right, because the free agent market is so lackluster, I think it would be the best way to put it. There are people to find and there are holes to fill, but there's no home runs here. And that's why it is, I guess, possible that, somebody might look at a player for player trade and go, well, at least we get to the head of the line of this person. Yeah. Because if they do hit free agency, they're going to automatically become like Cooper Kupp, Deebo Samuel. If they were to be released, will head to, assuming T. Higgins isn't really available, they head to the top of the list for everybody as best receiver available. So there's going to be a lot of interest in them. If you want to head that off, you've got to make a trade with them. And maybe Allen is someone that either one of those teams look at. Or, similarly with Allen, if you let him get the free agency, it's either him or Milton Williams. So those are the best ones available. So there's going to be a long line at the head of the line to get them. You can head that off by making a deal. So maybe you're right. We'll have to see what happens here over the next week or two. The other thing that popped up that Adam Peters won't talk about, and I don't blame him, is the other way to save money this offseason for them with existing players is to extend Terry McLaurin. There's no chance they're going to put him out on the trade market. And again, I think to your point about Allen earlier, could he play through a contract? If push came to shove, they could do that. They could have him play it out. They could suck it up in their cap. But I don't see a point in doing that. I think he has proven, especially with this quarterback, you don't want him going anywhere. So I think an extension to extend him out is possible. And then that would alleviate a lot more cap room in the short term as well. But the interesting part of all that, this cap room that they have and all that, is who are they spending it on? You know, like that's the other interesting part of this. You push something down the road to spend now on who exactly? So I see the merit in doing it. I think they probably will do it to probably lock him up for a couple more years at least, instead of letting him get towards free agency, which would make more sense to me to do that anyway. But to save more cap room, that's a secondary benefit of the whole thing to me.
I mean, what I will say, though, is they could pull the Eagles move here, give McLaurin the extension, but then give him a bunch of money up front. Like, I'm not opposed to that.
Yes.
Like, I do think this year you can be strategic on how you want to spend the money. And I know, like, Josh Harris has talked about how much money he's spent with this team. I think if you're Adam Peters, and honestly, if you're this fan base, you look at what's happening up there in Philly. The reason why they've been so successful in building that roster is because they give the money up front, and it's not over with, but the cap hit goes down. Go look at Jalen Hurts' cap hit every single year. They gave him so much money up front that it's like a pretty friendly contract for a good to great starting quarterback in this league. I think you kind of do a couple of those. I mean, I don't even know who the other one would be, but McLaurin's one that screams, give him that 3-year extension, give him a bunch, give him a bunch of money up front, though, because it's going to make the cap hit go down. And McLaurin's also not going to bitch about it down the line like some other wide receivers would, where they say, oh, I'm only making this much. And they're going, we handed you all the money already. So I do think you could be strategic here when you're saying, like, who are they spending it on? Well, you can kind of maneuver your cap a little bit this year because you have so much room.
Yes, that's a trust thing. And if there's ever someone who's worn this uniform that you can trust, it's him. So so I want to see what they do here. And I agree with you. They can play with the cap. I'm going to revisit what you just talked about with giving the cash up front in a minute, because Adam Peters all but said that. And I'll get to that in a second. Very much the show, ESPN 630, the Sports Capital.
At Sierra, discover top workout gear at incredible prices, which might lead to another discovery. Your headphones haven't been connected this whole time. Awkward. Discover top brands at unexpectedly low prices. Sierra, let's get moving.
All right, welcome back. Let's keep revisiting. Adam Peters spoke to the media yesterday at the Combine. Dan Quinn's going to talk today. By the time you hear this, he may have spoken. Don't at me with it. We go on before he speaks, and we'll revisit that tomorrow. But a couple of things that I've been talking about for the last couple of weeks that Peters talked about yesterday was everyone keeps talking about all the cap room that they have. They also have 28 free agents. So you have to think about it this way. Like, yes, they have cap room, but there are 28 positions that aren't even just filled on the roster at that point. So minus that, whatever that number is, minus that out of said cap room before you start talking about that they can go swing for the fences and sign all these other guys. Yes, they will have some room to maneuver. Yes, if they trade or release Jon Allen, restructure Terry McLaurin, they have even more room to try to take some swings, whoever that may be. But the first things first is they have a roster to fill. They're going to be busy over the next week or two, I would think, before free agency even starts, because he mentioned this as well. We have a lot of our guys that we want back. So I don't think they're, quote unquote, running it back. But if you actually look at the free agent market and you look at the success they had, it would warrant bringing back a majority of the players that they had from a year ago, because there doesn't seem to be a lot of opportunity here to massively upgrade through free agency. And then the draft is the draft. Yes, you want to build through the draft, but you can't guarantee that all these guys are going to come in and replace the veteran parts. So I expect them to be very busy over the next week plus before free agency starts, hopefully signing a number of their guys back.
No, I mean, you mentioned last segment, like Tress Way. Like, they need to get all those little ones done before free agency even opens up. And yeah, I'm with you too. Like, I know, people comment on our, YouTube page or your YouTube page, whatever. And like, I think I saw someone be like, have you ever seen people like so afraid of attacking success? I think it was a comment on one of our videos. And it was like, no, we're just being realistic about, you can't just go trade for Myles Garrett and give up these assets when half your team is not under contract yet. Like, you have to be realistic. I talked about this on my show a little bit yesterday. You have to be realistic where you're at in the process. They made it to the NFC Championship game. This is still a rebuilding process, though. Like, you have to be realistic of where the roster is at this moment in time. Like, you cannot forget that Ron Rivera, the way this roster was built, it was left in shambles to them last year. And in terms of, they had a lot of freedom to do things, but we knew last year when they were making all of the deals, this is still a work in progress because they didn't hand out any term with a lot of these guys too. Like, we talked about it last year, how we liked a lot of the moves they made, but it was also low risk too, because they were all going to be free agents, or they were only a couple years here and there for one or two guys. So yeah, like, they have all this cap room, but it's because they don't have any talent on the roster, or, a lack of talent on the roster. So for me, it's really become, be realistic where they're at in the process at this moment, because it's going to probably take one more year of this, if not 2 more years of this, to finally build up the depth to not have to turn over 10, 15, 20 players on a roster.
Well, I mean, listen, like, if you're making that argument, you are subject to your options.
Yep.
So again, show me on the free agent list who you think that they should go get that is quote unquote attacking success that would make you believe that they are going in this direction that you're talking about. I'd like them to have Jamar Chase too. He's not available. Like,
right.
I mean, like, what, like you can't make the Bengals trade him to you. Like, in the same way they can't make the Bengals trade T. Higgins to anybody. They may do that, but like, they currently aren't doing it. They're currently limiting him so that he can't get to the open market. Like, I'm with you. I'm not against at all attacking success. I think there's an opportunity here. I think, though, if you just realistically look at the options that are in front of them, I would sit there and go, you're just doing what Dallas did a year ago, going, go all in. Go all in for what? Like, what
right.
are you talking about? Like,
yeah. And
everybody is under contract. Like, you can't just pluck anybody you want and like pay whoever you want. There is a salary cap. Like, what are you talking about? We're just being realistic here. Like, I want them to attack success. I see an opportunity too. I love this quarterback. I think that they've got everything. The world's their oyster in front of them. The problem is, these players have to be available to get them. Like, so who are you talking about that, like, oh, you're afraid to attack success? For who exactly? I would love for them to get Myles Garrett. As far as yesterday went, Andrew Berry said he's not available still. What do you want us to do about it?
The other side of this too is like, I'm sorry, are you still used to the Snyder era? Go look at how they would sign the top free agent every single year and how much of a difference
They did it all the time.
And it never made a difference. So like, with this group, just trust the process. Like, that's what I've landed on here is if they go sign the big free agent deal, I trust them. But like, by the time the Albert Hainsworth contract rolled around, we all kind of knew how that one was going to end, right? Like, and that was before he, was failing conditioning tests and all that junk. But like, we knew, oh, okay, of course they signed the top D tackle. It's going to be a disaster. And it was. And then remember, it got so bad that then Dan wouldn't even sign the top free agents anymore. And we were like, what are we even doing here? So yeah, I'm full trust the process with this group, but also going and getting the top guy doesn't work every free agency class either. It actually is more detrimental, I think, than anything else.
So on the Myles Garrett stuff, ESPN, I think it was Jeremy Fowler, says they were literally reporting yesterday that if Washington is seemingly getting close to acquiring him, that the Eagles would step in and quote unquote make a deal to Cleveland that they literally cannot refuse, if for no other reason, not to make their own team better, but to ensure that we don't get him, which is the best news of the offseason that I've heard so far. They are scared of Washington. They know that their biggest threat to what they have going right now is what's happening here because of number 5. That's why. Because they look at number 5 and they go, we have the best defense in the NFL. He's the one guy who can solve it and score points against us. because he's a special player. He happens to be in our division. We can't let them get good enough on the other side of the ball to make these games too close for comfort. So I actually believe this, and they're in the position of quote unquote overpaying for something. See, this is where Peters, and don't tell me not attacking success. What's the price? If the Eagles say they're going to give the Browns 2 first-round picks for him, right? And Peters goes, we just can't do that at this point with our state of our roster. Guess what? They can. They've drafted so well. They have so many guys on rookie contracts. They have so many of their other stars under contract. They can actually do that and go, this will cost us down the road a little bit because we've done so well drafting, but it's worth the price to bring in a world-class player to our best defense and avoid the other team from getting them. So they can do that. Not unlike the way San Francisco, when Peters was there, said, you know what? We can make this trade for Christian McCaffrey because our team is ready to make a trade like that. If Washington doesn't have a tremendous amount of competition, then Washington could probably go to a length to try to get him. But there's going to be a price point that's going to be a breaking point for Adam Peters. And ESPN and Howie Roseman are fully admitting that like, if this actually turns out to be something that could happen, we're going to step in because we can go to a length that they can't or won't be comfortable with because they can't win with just adding one player. We can right now. We can, which goes back to the point of trust the process with what they're doing here. The Eagles are, and this is to their own benefit for what they've built, they have the ability to do something like that and not hurt themselves. Washington can't give up 3 first-round picks for Myles Garrett. He's just one player. They need 10. They need 10.
No, what I will say is what I like is that despite Eagles fans, throwing that score in Washington fans' face all offseason, and then winning the Super Bowl, it is a little bit of a hat tip from Howie Roseman going, I know that score wasn't exactly indicative of how that guy played number 5. We kind of know what's coming down the pipeline. So there's a little bit of mutual respect here. I think that's really what this is Roseman is going, I could build the best team in the world, but stopping that guy might be impossible considering that was his rookie year. And so I will just say, like, it feels good to be respected by them more than probably any other opponent, especially with what we know is going to come down the pipeline, which are going to be bloodbath type games over the next 5, 6, 7 years, as long as everybody's healthy. So that makes me feel good that they are officially worried about us. As far as it goes, though, with making the trade, I'm with you. I don't know what the price is. I don't know if it's going to happen either. Like, all the reporting right now is the Browns are not calling anybody back on this trade. So I don't know how much anyone has to worry about anybody getting him at this point.
Yeah, I think this will go past the draft, personally.
Yeah,
I think if he continues, I think if I'm Cleveland, you have him under contract. You could talk to him about an extension to see if that appeases him. If that doesn't do it, you could just play the long game here. He's under contract. He's under contract for a couple more years. It's not even one more year. He's got a couple more years.
2 years.
You get through the draft. Yep. You draft a quarterback, which is probably what's going to happen because they have the number 2 pick. Probably draft a quarterback. You see how that sits with him. You do a couple other things in free agency. You see how that sits with him. Let it drag out. You don't want to be in this draft anyway, getting these draft picks. This free agent market's not very good. I would just wait it out. I would totally wait. Unless someone came with such an absurd draft, absurd trade. That's not Washington. And that's apparently only Philadelphia if it is Washington. Like, they'll let Myles Garrett go to the Titans. They don't care. But if it's going to happen here, then they'll step in. I don't know. If you're Tennessee, that number 1 pick is strange. They got to think about everything with that, I think. But anyway, I don't think this is happening fast. I don't think they're in a rush to do it. I don't think they're in a rush to appease him. And unless Washington came forward with something that was too much to turn down, and then Philly ups it, which apparently isn't happening, or you'd hear more about this stuff kind of going down. Plus, I know he kind of hinted he'd like to play here, but he hasn't really outwardly said where he wants to go. Not that I think he should publicly do that, but he hasn't done that. So we don't really know where he wants to go. He's got to have something in mind of what he wants to do.
No, I mean, really, like the other side here too is like, I always say this in the NFL, the trading for a player isn't really the issue. It's the trading and the extension, because he says it's not about the money, but we all know whoever is throwing a haul at them has to give him an extension to at least make this deal worth it, right? So that's the part two of this, that I think why everything kind of cooled off too, because he could say it's not about the money, but we all know both sides probably want to get something done there too. And that's where some teams get a little apprehensive, because he's going to want to be the highest paid defensive player in the league, or top 5,
yes,
or whatever that is. To your point too of the Browns, I think I mentioned this yesterday on the show. I think the Browns would be smart to drag this out, because we've heard this draft is deep at some positions, but doesn't have like all this elite talent. I wouldn't want draft picks from this draft if I'm the Browns. They need to rebuild as well. Like, I would almost say, like, sit tight after the draft. We want next year's and the years after draft picks so we can move forward with this whole rebuild once the Deshaun situation has kind of blown over. I'd want to kick my assets down one more year down the line, as far as I would be with the Browns.
One other thing on the Commanders. So AP says they're going to try to re-sign a number of their guys. I assume that means Bobby Wagner is one of them, that they would like to have him back. I was surprised he signed here last year because he'd never played on the East Coast more than anything. That's what I was really surprised by. He played the majority of his career in Seattle, a quick stint in LA, and then went back to Seattle, right? Pete Carroll left. Pete Carroll's gone. Bobby Wagner leaves, wants to go play for Quinn and Witt. Awesome. He comes here. Huge part of this defense. Say what you want about his lateral movement or whatever stuff on the field. I thought he was worth his weight in gold and leadership and all the stuff that happened. He's a big part of the reset of the team. And I would like to think that they would like to bring him back, at least for one more year. Well, yesterday, Pete Carroll did a press conference at the Combine and said something about Bobby Wagner, and then ended it with, and he's a free agent. So Wagner came and played with Quinn and Witt. He came here because of the coaching staff. That's why he came here. Not because he knew Jaden Daniels was going to be great. And in fact, they hadn't even drafted Jaden Daniels yet, right? So he came here to play for them. I'm hoping his relationship with these guys here and with this quarterback makes him want to stay, because the guy he also likes to play for just said his name out loud and said, I'd like to have you in Vegas. Basically, didn't say that, but insinuated, I'd like to have you in Vegas. So AP, DQ, get on the horn. Make sure this guy wants to come back here, because he does have options, and not just options he would consider. He came here because of relationships. Here's somebody who's back in the league he has a relationship with. Let's get this done.
Yeah, I mean, I would hope to, like, he had a blossoming friendship with Jaden Daniels too, right? Like, those two were like kind of rivals all season long too. I would hope that means a little bit something. And honestly, this is the first time we get to pull this one. Do you want to win or not? Because that Raiders team is a mess. They don't have a quarterback. They might draft one, but it's not going to be, one that's premier. I would just say, like, if you want to win, it's here. Also, not only would you go to a team that's not really ready to win, you want to go to that division where it's Chiefs, Broncos, Chargers, and you are definitively the fourth team. So I will say this team has an argument to him to go, are you sure you want to go over there than to stay over here? And I think that's a legitimate argument.
Yes, I will say this, though, for him. He came here because of relationships. His family's out on the West Coast, right?
Yeah.
So, like, just take all that into account. Like, if you want him back, I would preemptively get in front of this one, because there are going to be some reasons and pulls for why he may just want to be in a different part of the country. So I hope he stays. I want him back. I thought he was a big part of what happened a year ago, and I want him back for another year, at least another year here. But I would want to get in front of this, because he's clearly a relationship person. He has a relationship, and a long-standing one, with the new head coach of the Raiders, who happens to be located geographically in a place that might be appealing to him. Even though he's not playing with Jaden Daniels anymore, he would be in a place that he might feel comfortable. So I just want to point that out, get in front of it, because of course he'll have options, but they're not good options until it's this type of option. And now he has one of those. Peters told me in the fall, he said Wagner's one of the few guys that actually represents himself, so he had to negotiate with him on the first contract, so he's going to have to do it again. And I asked him how that went, and he said, it's hard negotiating with Wagner. He won.
There you go. Yeah. I mean, well, he gets awarded. Like he's a future Hall of Fame linebacker. Those don't grow on trees these days. So yeah.
All right. We'll watch that. Let's see. As for the Raiders, Tom Brady, who's apparently spearheading all of the movement that they're trying to do, wants Matthew Stafford. They're one of the 4 teams that the reporters believe have reached out to the Rams to try to acquire Matthew Stafford. That's an interesting one. Would he go play for Pete Carroll? Because he would assume that the waters would be calmed there. And would he be interested in doing that? Wouldn't be that big of a move from LA. So if his family's not like, we don't want to go to New York, or we don't want to go to Cleveland, or whatever it is, we want to stay out on the West Coast because they like it, that might be a pretty interesting turn for them to send him over there. And if that were to happen, Mahomes, Herbert, Stafford, Knicks, that's a hell of a division if that ends up being the case next year.
No, I think this one should have some legs for it. The Raiders are one of the few teams that I think need to be calling about Stafford. I think it's the Raiders and the Steelers need to be calling them about getting a quarterback. Like, those are the 2 teams that are in desperate need of a quarterback that still have a pretty good roster. At least the Steelers have a better roster. The Raiders just need to steady themselves. Like, I've talked to you about like how I'm surprised people want to go there, that the organization has been in flux since they've gotten to Vegas. That would settle them down. I assume Tom Brady being around is settling them down at this point. They should be calling. And look, if Brady can make it happen, if Brady can't make it happen, no one can make it happen, essentially. So I'm not surprised they are calling about him. And that does check the box of they'd be trading him to the AFC and not keeping him in the NFC as well.
100%. All right, let me take a quick break. Bram wants to show ESPN 630, the Sports Capital. All right, one more thing from the NFL. They are coming for the tush push. The Packers have been outed as the team that have put in a motion to the Rules Committee to make the tush push illegal, but actually not the play, just a portion of it. You're not allowed to push a player forward part of it, which would have potentially unintended consequences, because how many times have you seen a player down the field running and he gets stood up and the offensive linemen catch up to him and push the pile forward? Would that potentially become illegal? I don't think so. I mean, are you saying that it just can't be a coordinated play at the line of scrimmage? And, I forgot about this part. That part is illegal, which is interesting that they've allowed this to happen. That part is illegal. So I think it would be more reinforcing you're just not allowed to do that. They could still do a quarterback sneak. The part that they can't do any longer would be the 2 players who get behind Hurts and push him forward. And the more I heard about it, and I'm sitting there going, that's true. That never was legal. Why were they letting them do this in the first place? I don't know.
No, I think that's the exact kind of argument here. I'm with you. Like, every team would run the tush push if they had the Eagles offensive line. Like, that's bar none how the league would run. But the pushing of the quarterback through is the illegal part. And I think the Packers are right here. Like, I don't think it can be a designed literal push. Give me the quarterback sneak. I'm fine with that, because that's football in a nutshell. Man on man, right? Beat the guy in front of you and get a yard. But they're kind of right. The push, we kind of turned to rugby a little bit on that front. So I get the argument here. I think they're just saying, we want you to start enforcing that, because guess what? You're not just pushing Jalen Hurts. Saquon is pushing Jalen Hurts. Like, he can pick him up and throw him if he really wanted to. So I see the argument here. I don't think they're going to ban it by any means, but maybe they start throwing the flag on the actual intentional pushing, I think. You can't
make a quarterback sneak and done with that kind of technique illegal. You just have to learn how to stop it. But the pushing part, they may tell them that's the part you can't do anymore. You'll get flagged for it. The Commanders had argued that they line up in an illegal formation. And so I think that's another thing that needs to be looked at too. That was the big when they were doing the Luvu jumping thing. I think that's when they were trying to get across. They're lined up illegally, And because the line has to be all set up, if you're set back enough, which if you watch closely, you'll see it. That's supposed to be an illegal formation. Anyway, I have a feeling they are going to enforce a rule and make it different for them. And probably they'll just take the push part of the tush push out, probably. Last night was a bit of a surprise for the Capitals. They just totally no-showed in the first period. Could have been down 3-4-0. Then, of course, made a game of it, turned on the gas, and just didn't have enough. And, I guess fans get their money's worth. They got an OV goal last night. But off of the weekend that they had, off the Four Nations thing, that was a bit of a surprise and a dud last night by them.
I did tell you they have a pretty good goaltender who was good last night, kept them to just one goal. The Flames also played defensively. And here's the other thing about the Flames that I didn't mention yesterday. They're fighting for their wild card lives, and they have one of these crazy East Coast trips where it's like Caps. They go down to Florida. They got to go play Dallas. They know that they have to win leading up to this deadline if they think that they're going to be a playoff contender. I think this was just one team a little bit more desperate than the Caps, and that happens. And look, first regulation loss at home since late November. It was going to end at some point. So if this was the one coming off of a 15-goal weekend, I'm not worried about it. It was low scoring. I knew it was going to be low scoring off of the weekend. I'm not worried about it one bit. And especially in the third period, they turned it on. They had their chances. Calgary put them away with the third goal. I'm not worried about it, though. They'll be fine.
Yeah, the third goal was a bad turnover, put Logan Thompson in a bad spot, and he hit, rebound. There was nothing they could do about it, and that one put it away. Let's see. Tonight, heat check for Maryland. They get Michigan State at home. They have been roaring hot. All the pundits are starting to pick them as a deep run potential this year in March because they're getting hot really obviously at the right time. We're going to find out how hot tonight when they play Michigan State at home. And then my boys down at AU can basically close in on the Patriot League regular season title. They get Navy tonight at home, final home game of the regular season. They are one game up in the Patriot League, 2 games to go. They play Navy tonight. They play a game on the road this weekend. If they win them both, or win one and have an Army lose one, they will be the host team for the Patriot League tournament. So that's the road will be wide open for them to get to the NCAA tournament. So go Eagles, go get them.
I'm very interested to see. Right. No. I was going to say it was a little delay there. I'm very interested to see, by the way, for Maryland, what the home court is. There's been a lot of chatter of guys, they're good. Come show up. Give us that home court advantage. I'm very interested to see what the Maryland students do tonight because it has been a little lackluster.
To the students. Yeah, to the students. You guys have a really legitimately good team. Show up. Show up. 100%. You're not on spring break. Show up. Show up. Support your team tonight. Just show up. All right, everybody. Talk to you tomorrow. Bram Show, ESPN 630 Sports Capital.